Welcome to this tutorial on how to set up a mail server using Stalwart. Now, I haven't really found any good tutorials on this, so I thought I'd just make my own. So let's get into it. Of course, you will need a domain. In this case, I will use this one. I do recommend switching your domain to Cloudflare if you haven't already, because mainly they have this import DNS feature, which will come in very handy later. Then, of course, you'll need a server. This doesn't need to be a very good one. I have one with 1 core and 6 GB of RAM and 40 GB of storage. Of course, if you want to send more emails, you'll need better. But if you don't send too many, then even a worse one than this is sufficient. Now, the first step is to, of course, connect to your server, which I'm using Termius for, because that can store the credentials for all of my servers and sync them across devices. So I just have to double click on this and I'll be connected. Now, the first step in the server is to install Docker, because we will be using Docker for Stalwart here. All of the commands I'll be executing here will also be in the paste bin linked in the description. Alright, now that Docker is installed, we can move on. By the way, I do recommend doing this with the root user, or else you'll have to put sudo in front of almost every command. If you are not logged in as the root user, you can simply do that by doing sudo su, and then you will also be root. Okay, now we'll just go to the Stalwart documentation, and which will also be linked in the description, and do this command to pull all the files. Now with this, you don't have to use this directory. You can use anything you want. You'll just have to modify the commands. Alright, and then you can simply copy this command and paste it, but don't execute it. We need to edit a few things. Firstly, the directory, of course. In my case, I used this one from the documentation. And then if you don't want to run anything else on the server, you can leave it as is. But in my case, I want to run another website on the server, so I'll run Stalwart behind an Nginx reverse proxy. So I will forward the port 10443 to the port 443 in the container, and then I will do the rest in the reverse proxy. Okay, let's run this. Alright. Now Stalwart is running, but before we can move on with it, we have to, of course, install Nginx. And then, in order for Nginx to be able to redirect TCP requests, we also need to install Nginx extra, or extras. Yeah, that's it. Okay, now let's go to etc nginx and open the nginx.conf using nano. In my case, you can of course use vim or vi or whatever you want. And then at the bottom we will append the following. I made this pastebin, which will also be linked in the description. And then you'll have to, all default requests will be redirected to 9443. They're coming in on 443. And then the requests to my mail domain, which my mail server should be hosted on, will be redirected to 10443, which, if you remember, we also set for the Docker container. And then for autoconfig to work, we also need to redirect these two subdomains to 10443. So let's edit these domains. Alright, now we can close this using Control X and then Y and Enter. Alright, let's actually create the basic DNS records now. First, I'll create an A record simply through mail.mydomain and with the IP address. I'd recommend turning off the proxy for now, because that'll just complicate things, especially with the SSL certificate and such. Now the rest of the required domains will automatically be generated by Stalwart. The only thing I'll do now is actually create a reverse DNS record. This is different from host to host. In my case, it's called rDNS, and I can simply edit this here. And I'll set it to... this domain isn't the one that emails will be sent to, like your name at yourdomain.com instead of your name at mail.yourdomain.com. So I recommend still putting the mail subdomain there so that you can still use your root domain for something else. Yep. And very important, you also have to do this for IPv6, or else Gmail and the other mail servers might reject it. Let's just use the first IPv6 IP address for this. Yeah, and that should be fine for now. Okay, let's now go to the Stalwart configuration page, which we can do by using the copying the IP address and then appending port 8080. This will take a while to load, and then we can have it spit out the login details for us here by using this command. So the username is admin in my case, and the password. This will of course be different for everyone. Alright. Now you can also do that stuff and choose a different database and authentication backend, but I recommend just leaving it as is, because it's just works. Now in the control panel, let's go to the settings network and let's set the host name to our domain. Alright, let's save and reload. And so let's add our domain next by going to settings. Oh no, that's wrong. Management and domains, and create a domain, which will in my case be this one. And yep, that's enough. And then click on these three dots, DNS records, and as you can see we have everything we need here. And now Cloudflare comes in handy. We can simply copy this zone file, create a new txt, I'll just call this zones.txt, then copy everything in here, save it. Now back in our Cloudflare, let's make sure we don't have any MX panels or anything related to emails. This is looking good to me, so let's click on import, select the file, zones.txt, upload, and yeah, that should be fine. And let's just change that I record to our current IP address too. I'm not sure if you absolutely need to do that. Alright, now the mail server should be able to generate a certificate for itself. So let's go to the configuration page next. And now let's go to settings, TLS, ACME providers. And the default one is Let's Encrypt, so, and that's perfectly fine. Let's leave it at that, set it as our default provider. And then we have to set our domain here, which is this, and a contact email. I'll just make this. Yep, and that's it. Let's save and reload. And as this is doing its thing, let's also change our server host name, which is an important step. In my case, this can be easily done using this panel for my hosting, but that's usually not the case, so you just have to use hostname ctl set hostname and then your domain. And we can check if that works by simply doing hostname ctl, and as we can see, that should have done the trick. And now we should be fine to create our first account. I recommend also setting the login name to the email, because most mail clients will struggle if you don't do so. So I'll just do me at my domain. Of course, you can call this anything you want. And let's also put this in here. Now in authentication, you can set a password and save. Now let's check if our certificate has been created yet. Settings TLS. So now this can take a while to get the certificate, but let's just periodically check if this field is filled, which in this case, as you can see, it is. So we should now be able to also go to domain. Perfect. So now we should actually be pretty much done. Let's check if we can actually send emails by sending one to mail-tester.com. To send one, of course, we need a mail client, which is not built into Stalwart. You can set up Roundcube, for example, for yourself, which I have done on my personal domain. It's not very hard. There are a lot of tutorials covering that. But for this case, I'll just use an SMTP test tool from this to this test. Alright, should be sent. Check my score. Alright, 10 out of 10. That's perfect. Okay, that I think finishes up this video. So I hope this was helpful to you. And have a nice rest of your day.